So you want to serve in ministry, but you also want to grow your business. You realize that both require a significant amount of time, energy, and mental capacity, but you only have 24 hours in a day and you don't want to burn yourself out. What do? That's what we're talking about in today's episode. Stick around. Welcome to Conflicted, the podcast exploring the tension Christian entrepreneurs face, trying to pursue success in business and sacrifice in service to Christ. I'm your host, Sean Tom Bagahan, and I'm glad to be with you on this journey. Welcome to episode 3 of the Conflicted podcast. If you've been following along, we're talking about the 3 initial conflicts I've faced as a Christian entrepreneur. The 3 conflicts are: the first conflict was the conflict of choice, choosing between ministry and business. The second conflict is the conflict of time, the allocation of how much time should be invested in growing as an entrepreneur versus growing as a devoted Christian. And the third conflict is the conflict of money, pursuing a financially successful business, as well as living a life of contentment and sacrifice. In episode 2, the last episode, I focused in on the first conflict, was the conflict of choice. And I pointed out that my conflict was really based on bad missiology, the understanding of Christian missions. I used to think that I had to choose between one or the other, between my vocation or ministry. And I talked about how God corrected that understanding through the scriptures to see that every Christian is called to serve Christ and fulfill the Great Commission. Some would be full-time ministers of the gospel, and their provision comes through financial contributions from the church. Other people work secular jobs, and I say that with quotes, quote-unquote secular jobs. We realize that as believers, nothing is secular, everything is sacred, but those jobs that would be deemed as secular, but they would serve God in the various contexts they find themselves in. And then still others would be a hybrid of both, similar to the Apostle Paul, who worked a full-time job, but he was also recognized as a full-time minister. And we call this bivocational ministry. I found myself being led to pursue that third option, in which I'd start a business and my ministry would fund and resource the ministry God called me to. And in so doing, I came to realize that there was a lot that I had to learn about ministry and a lot that I had to learn about business. And hence the third conflict was the allocation of my time. Actually, that's the second conflict, not the third. So right now, as of today, I am 8 years into starting Butler Branding. For some of you, you may think that's a long time. For others, you are probably a lot more experienced than I am, and you've been doing this for way longer. Where I currently am, I can say that I've learned a lot. I've grown a ton as an entrepreneur. I'm blessed to have built a company that I'm super proud of and has reached a level of success that I'm really grateful for. However, this was my first business, and I feel like I'm still very much new, and I really am learning a lot to this day, especially in the early days. Having literally no knowledge or experience, I had to learn a ton. I started reading books, I started watching courses, I started finding mentors, networking with other business owners, and that was just to learn some of the things that I needed to know in order to run the business. That didn't actually include the work I had to do on my business. In my business. For entrepreneurs, that time has to be split up into at least what I would consider 3 ways to be successful. One is you need to work on yourself. You have to grow as a leader and as an entrepreneur, especially if you're leading a team. You need to work on your business, setting up the systems, processes, and procedures for how you're going to get things done and get them done better. And that work never ends, by the way. And third, you need to work in your business, doing the actual output that your company produces. So you have to work on yourself, you have to work on your business, and you have to work in your business. In the first few years, I had to gain what I would equate to a college degree's worth of information and knowledge. while actually doing the work. So I was very much building the runway while landing the plane. And in fact, I was learning how to build the runway, then building it while landing the plane. There were times that I was working like 60 to 80 hours a week, and I was barely making it financially. I remember there was times where I paid my staff, I couldn't pay myself. And so there's the work of learning, growing, and being mentored as a business owner. Then there's the work of running the business, leading my team, trying to close deals, doing marketing and doing sales, designing and creating things for clients, invoicing and learning new technology. All that coupled with the stress of making very little income to start, trying to provide for my family. Now I'm starting to have kids at this point. And on top of all that, serving at the church, ministering on the streets, putting together Bible studies. I was burned out for a while. I was glad to do all this if it would substantiate into a successful business that allowed me to be a self-funded missionary. The thing is, when I first came to Christ, I had a normal job. I got off at about 5:30. I went home, and the rest of the night was mine. I was married to Candace, but we didn't have kids yet, so I really spent all my extra time just devouring the Bible, praying and studying and watching sermons, getting into apologetics and theology and watching debates. I was growing like crazy in my knowledge of God, and I had the time to share everything that I was learning with other people. When I started Butler, all my time that wasn't with my family was pretty much working in or on my business, or working on myself to learn how to build the business. All that time that I had with the Lord, which was just me and him, I felt it was like sacrificed. I started questioning my call, especially when the business was struggling and I wasn't making enough to get by. Am I really doing what the Lord wants me to do? Am I sacrificing ministry on the altar of success in business? Oh man, that was a terrible fear. Like, did I miss it? Did I just pursue this business thing as a selfish means to make money? And am I sacrificing my call on the altar of success in business? That was a terrifying thought. And, I had an epiphany. The epiphany was this. I have to respect the seasons that God has me in. Now, I realize now that those early days of learning and growing in Christ, they were precious, absolutely. But I cannot look at those days and try to bottle them up as something that's normative for the rest of my life. I can't try to go back to that time because it may not ever happen. I was in a different season in my life, and God granted me that for a time. I've since learned that I need to respect the season that God has me in. And if I'm going through a season where I have to kill it at work and provide for the family, God is going to give me the strength to go through that season while remaining faithful to him, whatever that looks like. And that's going to look different for everybody. What does faithfulness to God look like in the season that you're going through? I can't rush the process because I have some idea in my head about what serving God really is supposed to look like. And I think that's where the root of my fears were coming from, is that I developed in my mind a picture of what I thought service to Christ would look like. It wasn't coming across the way that I thought it was. And then now I'm starting to get depressed, and by God's grace, I'm in a different place now. I'm not having to grind to survive. My business is relatively successful. It's growing. I'm extremely blessed. However, in retrospect, I realized that even during those times, those seasons of crazy work, God was still using me to bless others. A lot of people are trying to look for balance in life. You hear a lot about this balance, work-life balance. There's balance. There's extremes on the other side, finding balance. But if you think about balance, it's really a false notion. Balance is the idea of making something steady by distributing equal weights to all sides, right? So you're distributing equal weight to all sides. And really, that's an impossible in all of life, not just entrepreneurship. There's certain seasons of life where you need to put a heavier weight of distribution in certain areas more than others. You know, if you're going through a hard time in your marriage, you're going to need to cut out some time from other areas and devote a heavier weight towards investing in that relationship. If you're raising young children, there's a different weight of distribution and investment into your kids than for those who may be empty nesters. Rather than balance, I think we need to be seeking obedience. And obedience looks differently depending on the season that God has you in. Those early days of having hours every day to spend in prayer and study, yeah, they were precious, but I can't use that as the barometer to determine whether I'm being faithful to God in a particular season that may require that I invest hours into another aspect of my life. So my advice to the ones struggling with how to spend their time would be to reflect on the season that God has you in now. Then pray. What responsibilities has God given you? Where is He calling you to invest your time? How is God trying to grow you now? Ask God for wisdom and guidance as to how to navigate the season you're in, and don't put unrealistic expectations on yourself by comparing the current season that you're in to other seasons God has had you in the past. So my first conflict as a Christian entrepreneur was the conflict of a false choice. You can serve God and run a business. The second conflict was the allocation of time. And the takeaway is you have to learn and respect the season that God has you in. The third conflict was when I started looking at the Bible and seeing all the passages that talk about sacrifice and suffering and the warnings of wealth. On the next episode, I'll talk to you about the conflict of money. I hope you stick around. Thanks for sticking around. If you liked this episode, please do me a favor and subscribe, share the podcast with others, and write a review. It only takes a second, and it helps get the word out to more people. Also, if you want to support the podcast financially, please visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/Sean Tamba. That's patreon.com/SEANTAMBA. Any amount definitely helps. You can also see the link in the show notes. That's it for today, folks. Thank you, and God bless.